So hello everyone, my name is Nolene. I work at an organisation called Journi. To give you a little bit of context about Journi, for those of you who don't know, we support the career progression of diverse professionals from day one all the way up to board level. And we do that in partnership with organisations running programmes and also through our community. And my job is to look after that community. I also do that with other partners such as GTA Black Women in Tech. So that's who we've partnered with today to run this webinar. I'm just going to introduce Danny and let her tell you a bit about herself and GTA Black Women in Tech, and then I will introduce our lovely speakers.
Thank you. So if you don't know, my name is Danny and I am the Brand Partnerships Manager at GTA Black Women in Tech. And we are a tech nonprofit, and our mission is to inspire and support Black women who are in tech, those looking to get into tech, helping them excel in the industry, in their careers, fostering diversity and inclusion across the sector. And we do that through events, our community, and partnering up with different brands as well. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. And so before I ask our lovely speakers to introduce themselves, I just wanted to set the scene in terms of why we're hosting this webinar. So as Danny mentioned, they focus on Black women in tech and their progression in terms of development and creating resources. And at Journi, we do the same in terms of focusing on supporting individuals from day one all the way up to board level. And so what we know is that in terms of technical expertise, we see there are resources out there and people have a lot of those, but sometimes there is a lack of information or maybe exposure to experiences of others when it comes to soft skills and handling different situations. So we thought it was important to shed a light on this topic, which is the soft skills in leadership and how that really shapes great leaders. So yeah, without further ado, I'm going to ask Obi to introduce herself and yeah, just say thank you so much to both of you before we start taking the time. So yeah, tell us a bit about yourself, and I'm going to put you both on the spot and ask you to share a win after you tell us about yourself that you've recently had.
Sure. Hi. So I'm Obi Bamidele. I'm a mom of one. I have a 13-year-old daughter, married for coming up to 18 years. I live in Essex. In terms of what I do, I am currently the interim COO at UK Youth. And UK Youth is, 100-year-old youth organization that basically empowers and supports young people to thrive. So I've been there for about a year. So my background essentially is leading operations, primarily across social impact organizations in tech. And so this is the first for me in terms of working in the youth sector. And I'm very passionate about supporting organizations who have a strong mission to either empower young people or work with women, primarily just working supporting underrepresented and underserved communities. That's something that's really important to me. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. And in terms of quick wins, I think from a personal point of view, we've just my husband and daughter, we just agreed that our holiday destination for summer, which is we picked Dominican Republic. So that's a quick win because it was a mindful to pick a place. So yeah, that would be my quick win.
That's amazing. Wow, I'm jealous. Zoe, how about you?
Hi, I'm Zoe Briscoe. I'm a senior product leader. I've worked across various sectors such as health tech, med tech, pharma, education, and publishing. I work more in the kind of digital transformation area, so leading digital transformations across big organisations such as Lloyds Pharmacy, McKesson, HCA, NHS Digital, and most recently now I'm working with Maztec. which is enterprise technology company, and I'm building their product team from the ground up. So it's the first time that they really were kind of much more of a delivery led solution building organization and never had a kind of product functionality. So my role at the moment is trying to build in that functionality as they're vying for more work to be working with the NHS. So at the moment, whilst I'm doing that, I'm also working with NHS England around improving their systems as well. Just a bit about myself. I'm also a mum of two. I'm a mum of two, got two daughters. They're a bit older, they're in their 20s. One's still at uni and one's just left uni. And I'm also married. And a quick win for me, I would say, hearing that one of my mentees has excelled and found themselves in a really, really good organization in a management position, which they didn't think they had the confidence to get, and they did. So as much as it's a win for them, I feel it's also a win. I feel very proud that I was able to kind of support them in that win. I just really like and enjoy seeing people excel and do well. So I also do a lot of mentorship within the organization and outside of work as well. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you both. I think there are so many, it's nice how aligned we all are on supporting other people. And yeah, we're really grateful to have you both on the call. And I just want to say to the audience, if you have any questions as we go for Obi and Zoe, I'll be doing a little Q&A at the end, so feel free to put them in the chat. And also, if you have any wins to share, definitely share it. We're all about positivity and celebrating everyone and everyone's wins. Okay, so let's get going with some questions. So the way that we'll do this is we're just having a chat, really. I'm asking Obi and Zoe some questions, and then we'll build on those if there are builds, or we will then go on to a Q&A. Very conversational and yeah, leaning into both of Obi's and Zoe's lived experiences, whether that's professional, personal, whatever it is that that makes up your experience and kind of your leadership persona and personality. We'd love to really, yeah, learn more about that. So in terms of our first question, it's around balancing the active leadership in a high pressured environment. So how do you balance both technical skills with soft skills like empathy and emotional intelligence to make sure that your teams are motivated and they perform at their best? So I don't know if one of you wants to take it first, or do you just want me to put one of you on the spot?
Don't mind.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind. I think that one of the things I think about leadership is it's not just about the whole, especially when you're in technology, it's not just about technology, it's about understanding people. And I think when you're working in a field like technology and you've got all these very different complex, things to explain to people, you need to have that connection with people. So it's about finding that balance between your technical expertise and emotional intelligence, I would say. Knowing and being able to read the room and being able to know when to lead with your technical expertise and when you would apply your more empathetic side. So I think it's very much a balancing. It's finding that balance. But I think it's really, really important to have empathy, have that understanding. For example, with my teams, I like to get to know my team members. I don't just come in, and it's not just on a work level. Everybody in my team, I know their children's names. I know lots of stuff about their family and things like that. You get to know people, you get to understand, their strengths, their weaknesses. You get to understand what motivates them. And it's about building that kind of relationship with people. I think that's really, really important. And I think, it depends, from working with your team to working with, CEOs and VPs. I think it's also having that ability to be able to relay technical terms in layman's terms. So having that understanding, being able to, I keep saying, being able to relate to people on a level, but also having that understanding that, you don't just go into a room and start talking to them.
Yeah, sorry, I got most of that, Zoe, and then I think I just broke off. But Obi, did you have a perspective, or did you already say it? I don't know if I missed it.
No, Zoe was still talking. I mean, completely agree with Zoe's points. I think for me, as a leader, it's of teams. It is very easy to just be caught up in the busyness of work. Deadlines. Just after the other, and so something that I feel is important to do is just to always make the time to just connect, and you sometimes have to be intentional about it, because days and weeks can go by and you realize you're just churning out work. And some of the things I've done, but when I have a team anyone join my team, I am keen to ask questions like, things like, well, what motivates you? There's this thing called the get how to work with me manual, and it basically, you ask your teams to fill out the manual, and they tell you how they like to work. Some people like weekly check-ins. Some people like more sort of every other week. Some people want people just want have different ways of working. People like a lot of information. People like more piecemeal. So I think the more I do that with my team, then it just helps me understand their ways of working, and I can tailor that. And I think for me, it's really, I'm also a psychotherapist. So I trained as a psychotherapist. So for me, active listening is massive. It's, I think, taking the time to just listen, and being open and vulnerable. Not always coming across like you know everything. It's I think just giving people space to also bring in be clear on what people can bring in, and encourage them to sort of play their part. I think those are key things for me.
Love that. And I have an experience of actually working somewhere where it was part of the onboarding to always talk about the ways you work, and then share that with the rest of the team. I think I guess different organizations are different, but regardless of size, knowing how somebody works is so important. Then you kind of bust myths really early on, actually, if you do that activity, which is, it's really nice that you're giving practical things people can do as well. And so if we kind of move on to more navigating complexity and change within organizations, Zoe, your work involves digital transformation and driving innovation. And Obi, you've led teams in scaling businesses with a focus on social impact. So how do you both think soft skills like communication and adaptability play a role in navigating changes and challenges that organizations have during change and actually what we know now in tech is that things are changing very quickly all the time, and the same with like economic climates and different things, so organizations are constantly going through change. Maybe Obi, you could start on this one in terms of the two key soft skills that we're focusing on are communication and adaptability, which you've both slightly touched on, but it'd be good to hear more about that and how you hone into it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that question, even in my current role, and other is so right now resonates. It's what we're going through. As to your point, I think we're in an environment now where a lot of organizations are going through a lot of change, whether it's restructures, and a lot of organizations are going through redundancies. I think one of the things I'm taking my team through, where I always start with the why. I think it's really important to start people. You get the most out of people when people understand why you're doing what you're doing. So it's really bringing people on that journey, and before you delve into, and that has to be part of your communication, why we're doing this, the rationale behind it. I think that makes people connect more. and engage more. In terms of communication, it's really ensuring that people know why you're doing what you're doing, and people there's a process. People want to see, okay, so what are you outlining the process, and then bringing them in on it. So those are the key things that I do, and I thought transparency is core for me. I think the more transparent that I can be as a leader, and that sometimes also means not being honest that you don't always have the answers. I mean, sometimes, we're still in process, but people value that transparency. So I think for me, it's the why, being transparent about the why, and then just being transparent about the process. And if you don't have all the answers, be open about that and take people on that journey. So because I think strategy will any change strategy goes wrong if people feel excluded. So if people feel included and they're part of it, and also you realize that then it's in that transparency that the answers sometimes will come from even from the most unlikely places, because when you involve people, they have ideas, and people can share that. So yeah, that's definitely how I sort of work. Communication for me is key, and being clear on the why.
Love that. And Zoe, did you have a build or maybe a different perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I very much agree with everything that's been said. I mean, one of the things about product is about understanding the why and also explaining the why. And so that's that's absolutely key. And I think it's, with any change, clarity of communication, clear communication is absolutely essential. Comms, over communicating is never too much. It's, people like to understand, what's going on. Totally agree about transparency. I think the worst thing you can do when when any organization is going through change is to not be transparent and to hide things, because you have to build trust. And, through transparency, you build trust with people. And I think one of the big things that I think is really, really important when you're going through change is, along with that transparency, but also explaining to people, what are the benefits? What is this going to do for you? How is this going to improve your working situation, especially when you're implementing technology? It's one of those things where people get really worried whenever I come into an organization and they see that there's going to be a change. Some people are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my job, or this is, what's this technology going to take over? And 9 times out of 10, it's about efficiency gains. It's about actually making their lives much easier and freeing them up to be able to do other things that they've not been able to do. And it's about really emphasizing the benefits. How is this going to benefit you on an individual? How is this going to improve your ways of working? And I think that's one of the key things. Sometimes people just say, there's a change, but then people are like, so what does that mean for me? If you're not transparent and clear on what that change means, it's really, really difficult to get people's buy-in. And I think that's one of the other key things. It's important to get buy-in with change. It's really difficult to implement change when there's resistance. And, the more that you're transparent, the more that you're honest, the more that you can explain those benefits, the more likely you're meant to get people on board and get that buy-in and get that support. And that will make things much more seamless. I mean, I don't think there's any organization that I've come into where it hasn't been that bringing in some digital transformation, which is going to implement change. So it's all, it's really, really key. So it's very much about, listening to people's fears, understanding what their worries and their concerns are. If you can, put them at ease. If you can't, then be honest and say, well, I haven't got the answer to that right now. I can try and get it, or you may not be able to try and get it. But it's always being transparent, but also understanding and being sensitive to people when you're going through transformational change. I think that sometimes organizations, and leaders, we forget to be, understand that you're dealing with human beings here, and, this change is impacting people. So, have a listening ear, actively listen, show some empathy, and, turn the ambiguity into clarity, make it more clear for people. That's how I usually go about it.
I have a follow-up question for you both on, it sounds like that's a big part of your values, but how do you manage that when you're with a group of leaders where maybe another leader on the group of leaders or the group that you work with is resistant to being transparent or is saying that you shouldn't? How do you, I guess, showcase that in organizations or build that culture? Because I'm assuming that some of the leaders on the call or may have someone above them or beside them that may not agree with that type of approach. So how do you still be transparent to the rest of your teams and people if there is that resistance?
I can speak to that. I think, so the way, in terms of obviously as a leader, I'm working with my peers, because in most roles, obviously there's a CEO, I report into a CEO, and there are other sort of exec directors. It's important that everyone's aligned. So we talk about, well, we must sort of commit, is it disagreeing or agree to commit? What's the saying? My brain has gone. But you like what in whatever you do, even if you don't agree in that space as leaders,
Yes.
you have to be aligned and you have to agree that this is what you're going to put out into the rest of the organization. So I think the first thing in a situation where there's resistance, my role, particularly because my role covered people, finance. I would be keen to ensure that that person understands the implications of a lack of transparency. So that means, you are going to lose people. And like Zoe said, you won't have the buy-in, so you won't get the efficiencies, the results you want. So I think it's taking that leader on that journey, and saying these are risks that if we do not do it this way. And also then attrition is also, I think people will leave. And so I think but at the same time, we can't go out to our separate teams and then I'll be like saying, oh, this person is, they're not really bought in. So we must agree and commit to that, whatever it is we decide, so that we are aligned in how we communicate that. That's what I would do. And the other thing I was going to say is, but it's something I'm also learning, especially in the climate that we find ourselves, is pointing out to my team that, and bringing people on the journey, but also I think this acceptance that change is constant. I mean, I think we're in an environment where now, gone are the days where, you get into a role and that role is the same role, that change is just constant. And we have to start to embrace that. And I think people embrace it when, when we show, as again, that transparency and vulnerability, that sometimes it's tough. Change, even in our personal life, change happens. And it's like, how do we ensure that we are collectively working with change and just accepting it as part of life?
Yeah, I think with me, when I've been in those situations, which is regular, I think when a lot of times with leadership, people are really scared to be transparent. And I think that a lot of the times what I always like to do, I like to delve a bit and try and understand. I'm one of these people that likes to try and understand. So I always want to understand, well, why? Why don't you want us to say this? What do you think will actually happen? And then you kind of tell that, and then a lot of the times you can allay their fears, because a lot of the time what they think is kind of like, well, the implications of not telling them is worse. So it's kind of, it's that whole kind of thing, is like trying to understand. Like a lot of the times when you hear the reasons why, oh, well, this will cause this or this will cause that, a lot of the time it's speculation. But by not telling people and not being transparent means you end up putting off the inevitable anyway. And I think that the whole thing is key. Exactly what Obi's saying. You have to be aligned. Leadership have to be aligned. You can't have a fragmented leadership. It has to be, in order for you to move forward and for something to succeed, you all have to be aligned. So I always try and understand, what those fears are, and we have to come to an agreement on how we're going to move forward with it. And I think that's and with things like this, sometimes you don't always get everybody's agreement, but you have to move forward. It's like the 80-20 rule. You have to we have to move forward with what's best. And sometimes, it's what's best for the organization, not necessarily what's best for ourselves. Some people might say, oh, I don't want to say this because this person in my team would be awkward. It's not about that. It's about what we're doing here is in relation to the best interest of the organization. So, it's about that alignment and, just trying to understand and put those fears, allay those fears, but also explaining clearly what the ramifications would be if we don't be transparent. And you're just still going to have to deal with it, and it could be worse later on down the line.
Yeah, so touching on implications and I guess empathizing with other leaders as well, right? And understanding.
Yeah, 100%. Understanding.
Trusting those, yeah. And in terms of, so our next question kind of leads nicely into that, in terms of that type of emotional intelligence and inclusion, as you're both leaders who've both talked about your passion in terms of supporting groups, as well as, advocating for diversity and inclusion, how do you both use your soft skills to create environments that do support underrepresented groups or everyone? It would be good if you both could share any specific strategies or moments where your skills have really helped break barriers or challenge and support, those groups.
I think for me, for example, most of the organisations that I go into and I've worked in a leadership position, I'm usually the only Black female in most situations. And I think that one of the key things for me, which I've learned throughout my whole leadership journey, is about authenticity. It's about, I think in my early leadership days, I used to feel that I had to behave a certain way to fit the mold. I had to hide certain things. I wouldn't talk about my culture. I would kind of like dampen a lot of stuff down. When people would be having conversations, I'd be very kind of quiet and not so open about myself. And I think by me being more of an authentic leader and being true to myself, I think that I found that within organizations, it's given me that ability to speak up more for people like myself. And when I go into organizations and I do see other, people, other diverse groups or other people within the organization, I do always make a point of reaching out and creating that safe place. In my previous role, and I'm setting the same thing up in my new role, I mentored a lot of up and coming associate product managers, associate POs that were new, that had come into the organization. It's creating that safe space. So being able to create that space where they can actually talk about their challenges in an organization, because just put it out there, we face a lot of challenges and there's no one to talk to. And I know how it was for me. And it's about being approachable. And, I'm not, people will think, oh, you're so busy, I didn't know if I could come and talk to you. No, please come and talk to me. And making that really clear that I am open. And, being part of the groups, all organizations have these diversity groups and things like that. And I go on them, and some of them are just kind of like, some of them, it feels like it's just a tick box exercise. So for me, it's about being active in those groups, pushing other members of leadership to engage. What are we trying to, ensuring that we have clear objectives? What are we trying to achieve with this group? Holding people to accountability as well. I think that's so key, because there's so many times it's like, oh, we have these groups, but then what are you doing? What have you achieved in the last quarter, your last 2 years, apart from saying that you are a diversity group? What do? You don't do anything. And I find that quite frustrating, to be honest. So it is about pushing those, but it really is about using those soft skills, not only with my peers and me being my authentic self, and being very open about the challenges and speaking up for other people as well that I see. For example, in a previous role I had, there was a situation where it had been brought to my attention that every time another member of my team, one of my teams, every time she spoke, somebody spoke over her. And it got to a point where it was kind of like really, really, really frustrating for her, but she just didn't know how to deal with that situation. And it was about making other people aware that, you know, as a Black female, it's sometimes quite difficult to get your voice heard. And that's what was exactly happening to her. I came in and observed the meeting, and I could see each time she spoke, she got cut off. She got cut off. She got cut off. She got cut off. And it's like making everybody I guess it's bringing back that awareness about the struggles, and you know, and not just allowing it to just happen, and just, you know, saying, oh well, you know, maybe she should shout a bit louder, was what the comment that somebody else said. You know, it's kind of, you know, bringing that awareness to other people in leadership as well, to say, actually, some people in the teams are struggling. Can you please look out for this? Because this is quite common. And surprised how many people didn't know that it was common, and they actually saw it. So, oh yeah, I saw that, but I didn't really think anything of it. You know, it's kind of that kind of awareness that I like to bring about.
No, that's you touched on so many great things, and I think the three things that's coming to mind is that being authentic and role modeling, so that people feel safe and they feel comfortable, and then creating those spaces. So you reaching out, I think that's super generous, and yeah, really great. And then the last thing was the awareness of speaking up and bringing things to light, because I think you're right. It becomes like a normality. Certain cultures and the way people behave in organizations. And yeah, Obi, is there anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I was nodding my head as Joe was speaking, because I think in the first instance of authenticity, I've been on that journey as well. Before, I mean, my journey was just even things like, there was a time people, my name is Obi, but people were calling me Obi, and in my early part of my career, I kind of stood for it, and it's like, well, that's how people choose to. Now, I guess the older I am and the more aware I am, I'm very clear on that this is who I am and how I present. But I'm a big believer in showing up as my true and authentic self at work, whether that's in how my hair, you know, or how I come to work. I do not want to hide parts of myself. No longer do I do that. And so, having gone through that journey, then I'm able to support that in with other members of staff, particularly who are not at lower levels, because they see that I can be that person. I can speak openly about my own struggles and my journey. And so, I mean, a good example of some of the things I've done. Last year when we had the civil unrest, I led safe spaces at UK Youth, just because I knew that a lot of us were struggling. You know, some of us were scared to leave our houses, you know, as Black and brown people, because of a lot of the attacks or threats that people were feeling. And for me, that was a crucial time to just bring people together, you know, as allies as well, but just to understand that, look, this is a tough time for us. And it may not just be a time where we can just keep cracking on with work. We must take time to understand that we are going through stuff. And did the same thing last month when, you know, with some of the Trump, when, you know, obviously, as you know, the Trump administration and some of the announcements that were made and the impact on marginalized groups from, you know, Black and brown communities, but also even LGBTQ staff as well. So we again led safe spaces just for us to be able to hold space for people to just share how they feel. I've also run panels just on, like, when I in my previous role, which was more within, it was a CRO role, but within sort of the built environments, you know, really looking at how we can break down barriers to ensure that there's more access for people particularly from global majority groups to come in. So, like, for me, I think it's important. I think representation is key, and I think that the more that we as leaders are able to advocate for our communities, speak up, as to Zoe's point, talk about some of the things that the cultural issues that sometimes, you know, some people are not aware of. Like someone could say, I mean, there are many comments that sometimes I have where someone might say, for even example, I had a recent conversation this morning where we'll be talking about EDI at work, and we're bringing on, I'm driving an EDI audit because, I mean, there's a lot of things going on in the organization that we need to address. But someone talked about microaggressions, and I knew that they meant racial microaggression. But the leader I was talking to was like, well, you know, they were talking about just but isn't that just everyone? I'm like, no, we're talking about what that person meant was racial microaggression. And sometimes it's not stuff that people can see. You can't, it's there in secrets. You don't know, but it's felt. And we need to give voice to that because some people don't even understand it. So it's sometimes it's just standing in the gap and being able to call out things or speak to things that you know that what people are talking about that go over other people's heads. So it's a journey. I will say it's also a struggle when you're the only person and when you're at leadership. It's a struggle because it's like you are trying to do all things. You are trying to, and what's hard is that unfortunately, people at lower levels may not always even see that you're doing that advocacy. They may not. It's always felt like you're kind of your person of privilege, and that you're kind of you've now have a seat at the table and you've forgotten us, but it's not. But it's. I mean, I don't know if Zoe experiences that. You're always walking this fine balance. You're trying to be all things, and it can be tough. So it's important to recognize that.
Yeah, it is tough, and I think sometimes I always explain it as sometimes I feel like I'm a lone ranger. I feel like I'm fighting this at this level by myself because there's no one else like me. So I don't have someone else in my corner. So I have to explain, and sometimes I have to over explain and explain again and again. And sometimes it may not be the first time I'm heard. So it means that I have to then dig deep and think, oh, sometimes it's so easy to just say, I'll give up. But I think I've overcome so much, and I'm so passionate about it. I do become a bit of a bugaboo, and I will keep on until I am heard, because I feel that it's so important. And I know that what I'm doing now is not only going to help, these other people, but people that come afterwards. And I just want to instill. And then when these leadership may go on to another organization, I'm hoping that maybe they'll take that with them as well. But I am so passionate about it. And I know the struggles because it hasn't been easy to get where I've got. I've had to take so many different routes, and had so many different pushbacks. It's been really difficult. So for me to be in a position where I can make a difference and I have a voice, I use it, even though sometimes it's not welcomed. It's just the way it is. It's sometimes you see people's faces and you can just see they're like, oh, about that again. Why has it always got to be about race? Why is it not like, they kind of try and make you feel a certain way for raising things. And I think it's about having that resilience to be able to stand up and say, actually and push back as well and say, well, I'm just saying it how it is. Not everybody's comfortable with it. And I think that's something as a leader as well. You have to overcome the fact that some of the things that you're going to raise, people aren't going to be comfortable with. But it's a reality, and it's what we face every day. So, we just have to be strong.
Yeah, and I think the insight I'm getting from that is because working at Journi for the past 2 years, something I hear a lot, especially when I attend events, is the burnout leaders of colour face at the top when they're the only people that look like them. And I think something that you said, Zoe, that I think is like resonating and maybe people can take away is that remembering your own why and the impact that you're going to create to keep supporting you. Obviously not to the point of where you can't function yourself, but understanding your boundaries, but knowing your why and remembering that actually your advocacy will impact many people after maybe you won't even be in the organization. So that's really motivational. And I think coming back to that and your own experiences, both of yours, has really shown in what you've said. And in terms of mentoring and looking after teams, you've both done that, and it would be good to think about or let us know on ways that leaders can develop their soft skills intentionally. So we've touched on quite a lot of soft skills. So communication, being transparent, authenticity, speaking up, advocating, empathizing. It'd be good to know how both of you, or do you have any techniques? It might not be conscious, right? You might just be doing it, but ways that you encourage other people to intentionally develop those, or you have.
I mean, there are two things I often say. It's to people, that anyone I'm mentoring, and then especially I'm mentoring someone who looks like me. I mean, I talk about curiosity and coachability. I mean, I think there is something about, it's important to be curious, because I think if you that just allows you to ask questions, offer your talents, skills. I think, and I say this because for I know that in the early years, my career, I didn't know that I needed to be that curious. In fact, I felt that maybe being curious or asking questions maybe I was overstepping. But then I was seeing that the people who were doing that were getting on. And sometimes it's always, oh, can I ask that question? Will I look stupid? But I've realized that curiosity is really key, because what it does, it just opens up opportunities, networks. So I think, but then also coachability is important. You have to be open to, something I tell myself is, I don't know everything. I know that as a Black woman who's had to really advocate for myself, that's counterintuitive, because sometimes you have to present like you know everything, because that whole thing of you have to work twice as hard. We're often told that you have to do more. So sometimes it's like, can I even allow myself not to? Do I have to always present like I know everything? But I think I have to find spaces where I can show that I don't know everything. I can ask questions. There are people that I can go to and ask questions. But at the same time, let's just be honest, having AI is just, it's like, let's not underestimate the power of that, because now I'm in a meeting, someone says something, I'm like, I don't even know what that is, but I'm checking. So I think use those tools to be able to just to ask questions, have safe spaces that you can ask people, open up, ask questions that maybe you may not feel comfortable asking in certain environments. I think those the two things are big for me, and that's what I always encourage.
I think for me, especially like I was telling you, that one of my wins was like one of my mentees getting a management position. And one of the key things that I always say is really important, as as a leader, I think that I like to get feedback. I'm not perfect. So it's about actively seeking feedback and being able to take that feedback and improve yourself as a leader and be able to grow. Also the ability to be able to, I think having that ability to be able to, I know in product we talk about storytelling, but also being able to explain problems and, clearly, and, and just be able to kind of inspire some kind of actions to try and, when you're communicating with people. And I think the other thing is really key is empathy, of course, understanding people's different perspective. I think especially, I always say that I am, I'm a diverse leader. And I think that puts me in a position where I feel I have a better understanding of different perspectives, more so than maybe other leaders. I kind of see things and clock things that other leaders may not see. And I think having that empathy and that ability to understand different perspectives, I think is really, really key. And I think the other thing is around coaching. It's, I remember when I was training to be a coach, it was understanding and moving away from trying to do things for people rather than coaching them, and we call it enabling them So you're providing them with the skills and the knowledge to be able to go and do something themselves, where sometimes it can be quite easy to try and just do it like this, or tell them exactly what to do. And I think that for me, learning that was really, it's weird, but I felt it's quite empowering, because when you kind of enable people and you support them in a way that they then, to see how they then grow as well, I think is really powerful. And I think, you know, within mentorship, I find that's really key, is that enablement, you know, trying to push people and help them, to support them to do what they would do, rather than telling them what they need to do. Because sometimes people think they don't know what they need to do, but when you ask the correct questions and you probe them, they, you know, so then how would you handle that? So why would you say that? Or what do you think would happen if that happened? And then they kind of start getting them to think for themselves, and you can just see how people grow. And I find that when, through mentorship, you do see how people change from when they first came and, you know, they felt like they just didn't know anything, to how they can now solutionize for themselves and take charge with certain situations and challenges, which I know that when I first started out, there were challenges that came my way that I just kind of just shut down, and I didn't stand up for myself, which I look back and I think, oh, you know, I wish I did, but you know, you just didn't. But I think that, you know, if I had that mentorship back then, probably would have done things much more differently. But it's about, you know, learning from my mistakes and being able to support other people.
Yeah, and I think the thing that resonates most with what you said is the curiosity, as well as also a lot of the time we have the answer, but we're just we're just in it, in the thick of it, so we don't know we're doing. I get it all the time at work where I'll just blurt everything out to my manager, and then she'll be like, okay, let's start from like one point and just ask one question and just unravel everything. So yeah, it's so important. So before I go into any other questions, we do have some questions from the audience. So I'd like to do a couple of those just so that we make sure we have time for it. The question is, it was for Obi. It was, what was the tool you said you used to see how people work? And it was from Angela in the audience. I think it was a manual you mentioned.
Yeah, it's how to work with me manual. I mean, if you just Google how to work with me manual, it's there are templates that will come up. And also I would say it's also something that even if your line manager doesn't use it, it's also something that you can introduce to your line manager and basically this is how and fill it in. And yeah, it's some people it really works for them. So the how to work with me manual.
Thank you. And the other question was, can you give an example of how you've used soft skills to support or collaborate with a disabled colleague in a team setting? As being a disabled Black woman, I have had to think out of the box ways to allow my voice to be heard.
Is that question for me? Sorry.
Either of you, yeah. And you might not have an example, but it may also be from the perspective of how you could collaborate or support.
I don't have any examples. I mean, I have examples of working with sort of colleagues who, for example, neurodiverse, or someone who's basically had a recent ADHD diagnosis, and then it's again working with them to understand their needs and tailoring that to how they work, and reading up. You know, so for example, there's a book that as a result of working with this colleague, basically we read and then ensured that the team read so that we kind of understood what they were going through. And then, of course, there's also work at the moment, something that is huge within my organization I work for, is working with women who are perimenopausal or going through menopause, of which I am one. So again, it's how do we ensure that we tailor work and we are putting policies in place that meets those needs. So I don't have a clear example, but I think for me it's listening. It's still applying active listening, supporting the person to understand their needs and what they require and how we can bring that into the organization. I also find then using that as a if that's new to my team or the organization, then how do we put policies in place? I have, as a leader, I have the privilege to be able to say, well, this is coming up. These are the issues with my team. That means that we then either ensure that we put policies in place, we bring awareness. So it's driving awareness to the organization from that person. And if the person's also, if they're comfortable talking about it, because the lived experience, when people hear, I'm listen to people's stories. And if the person's open to that, then I think that helps even further to drive awareness within the organization and change.
Oh, Snowden disappeared. I think. Oh, you're back. I think. Was the question, how would you support a disabled person within an organisation? Is that what the question was?
The question was around, how would you use soft skills to support or collaborate with a disabled colleague in a team setting?
Well, so for example, I employed a disabled lady into my team you could see that she was disabled. I think that the key thing for me was about allowing her to lead. So for me, it was, if she wanted to talk about it, she didn't disclose it, even though you could see her disability was visible. She didn't disclose it. And, it was pretty clear that she wanted to be able to be treated just like everybody else, even though there were people in the organization which, obviously could see her disability. And I think one of the things for me is it's one of those things, just like what Obi was saying, is about, if how comfortable people are with it. I could see from this woman, she just wanted to be treated the same. She didn't want anyone to be, draw any attention to her disability. And she worked really hard. I knew from when I interviewed her, she was going to be amazing anyway. Her disability had nothing to do with it. And she worked really, really hard, and she's really successful now. She's done really, really well. So it's finding that balance where I've had other people who have, openly said, this is the issue. This is my situation, and I need adjustments to be made. And it's about, speaking to them and understanding how comfortable they are with you, how much they're happy with you divulging to the rest of the team. I think that's really key. I mean, you don't just go and blurt out to the rest of the team, oh, this is their disability. It's about having that conversation with them and coming to an agreement. How do you want me to communicate this? What are you comfortable? Would you prefer to communicate it? Because some people will say, oh, actually, I'd like to communicate it. So it's about, I find it's important to come to that agreement with them on how we should communicate it and how, we move forward with it. But it's about making those adaptations, making those changes for them. Obviously, organizations have policies in place, and also making them aware of those policies as well. And then talking to them and how do we enforce this? How, with the situation, how is this going to impact you? And how do we move forward, and kind of speaking to them on the one, not doing it in front of the team and, putting them on the spot. I think it's about discretion as well, and treating people with dignity. I think is really key.
Yeah, and I think it does lead back to everything both of you have touched on in the entire webinar, which is leading with people rather than above them, and being quite human-centered, taking a very human-centered approach of empathy, curiosity. And I have one last question just to round up the webinar. I don't know if you guys have seen recently on social media, there's this trend of taking your younger self for a coffee. So one of the questions, or the last question I think is a nice one, is what piece of advice would you give to your younger self about leadership? What would it be, especially in the context of balancing mind and heart? So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think for me, it would be I would tell my younger self, you don't have to know everything. I think because that's been my struggle. I think as someone sort of rising up through the ranks, and I've always had to the a time to the point of burnout where I think I have to be everything. I have to know it and do everything. And so it's like, it's okay. You don't have to know everything. And anything you don't know, you will learn. And just because you don't know it today, doesn't mean you won't know it tomorrow. I think it's that. That's what I would tell myself.
Thanks, Zoe. And Zoe?
I think I've touched on it already, is around authenticity, being authentic and not hiding who I really am and not trying to conform. I think that would be one of the things I would have told my younger self. And, and also to kind of, I think it's around authenticity, but also realizing that I think sometimes, especially when you're coming up through, the ranks and you're working with people, you kind of put them on this pedestal, and you have this kind of fear to say certain things or ask certain things, like, oh, I can't say that because they're this or they're that. And it's kind of thinking, just, they're human beings.
Mm-hmm.
They're just the same. They eat, they do everything the same as me. And don't be scared to ask those questions. Ask the questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. And what I've learned is that so many times when I ask questions now, I feel as I've got older, I will ask it. I don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, I'm sorry if you feel this is, and the amount of people that come after say, oh my gosh, I wanted to ask that. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked it. And that used to be me. I was the person that would say to them, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you asked that. But now and I wish I'd done that earlier, because I'd come out of meetings and there were things that I didn't ask because of fear of, this person's too senior, I don't want to ask that question, or am I allowed to ask that of them? I'm putting them on this kind of pedestal, like there's some superhuman or something, you can't talk to them. And I think it's just humanizing people and just bringing them down. At the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all are, they're not that thing, that I'm thinking that there's some super person or whatever. I don't know. It's just kind of like, I wish I was doing the whole thing of asking questions more from before. That's what I would say to my younger self.
Thank you both. We're 2 minutes over time, but I just want to say thank you so much for spending the last hour with us and sharing all your insights. I think we really undervalue how much our lived experience can support someone else. One thing you've said on this webinar might change the way someone thinks, the way someone approaches something in their workplace and in their life, really. And I think you both are amazing advocates and really doing so much. And I think both Journi and GTA Black Women in Tech are grateful to have you as part of our communities. Thank you to the audience and everyone who listened. Hopefully you didn't take away too much of your lunchtime. And what I wanted to say was that we will send a follow-up email to attendees and people who signed up with insights, a summary of what we talked about. And I hope you both don't mind me saying follow these guys on LinkedIn and support Journi and GTA Black Women in Tech. We've got a lot of other great initiatives happening, including programs. So thank you everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.